My name is Nancy Wilson, and at 72 years old, I never expected to be called a freeloader in my own home. Last Thanksgiving, as my family gathered around the table, I had spent 3 days preparing my daughter-in-law Jessica, stood up, clinked her glass, and demanded I start paying $2,300 monthly rent or leave. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at me, waiting for my response. What happened next changed our family forever. Before I tell you this story, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever dealt with difficult in-laws. I spent 35 years as an elementary school teacher before retiring. The children I taught were my joy, especially the first graders with their gap-toothed smiles and endless curiosity. My husband Thomas and I built our life around our careers and our 2 children, Daniel and Amanda. Thomas was a civil engineer who specialized in bridge design. We were never wealthy, but we saved carefully and prioritized paying off our mortgage. Thomas passed away 5 years ago after battling pancreatic cancer. We had been married for 46 years, and suddenly living alone in our 4-bedroom colonial-style home felt overwhelming. The silence was deafening after decades of family noise. Every corner held memories of Thomas, from his reading chair by the fireplace to the garden shed where he stored his tools. Our son Daniel is 45 years old and works as an accountant for a large corporate firm. He has always been methodical and reserved, much like his father. Daniel married Jessica 3 years ago after dating for just 8 months. She was 38 when they married, and this was her second marriage. Her first husband had apparently left her with significant debt, something she mentioned often when explaining her careful attention to financial matters. I tried to welcome Jessica into our family with open arms. I hosted a beautiful bridal shower for her, invited her family to all our gatherings, and made genuine efforts to make her feel included. But there were red flags from the beginning that I chose to ignore for Daniel's sake. Jessica frequently commented on the value of things, asked pointed questions about our family finances, and seemed disappointed when she learned Thomas and I had lived modestly despite our stable professions. Our home has been in our family for 40 years. Thomas and I purchased it when Daniel was just 5 years old and Amanda was 3. We chose it specifically for the excellent school district and the large backyard where our children could play. The house has 3 bathrooms, hardwood floors throughout, and a sunroom that Thomas added himself 15 years ago. We made the final mortgage payment 10 years before Thomas got sick, and knowing our home was fully paid for gave us tremendous peace of mind during his illness. After I had been living alone for about 6 months following Thomas's death, Daniel suggested I consider selling the house and moving in with him. His argument made practical sense, he said, because the house was too big for just me, and the maintenance was becoming a burden. I appreciated his concern but wasn't ready to part with the home where Thomas and I had built our life together. Instead, I made a counter-proposal. Since Daniel and Jessica were renting an expensive apartment downtown, why not move in with me? The house had plenty of space, they could save money, and I would have company. Daniel liked the idea immediately, but Jessica seemed hesitant. After some private discussions between them, they agreed. Initially, the arrangement seemed beneficial for everyone. I enjoyed having company in the house again, and Daniel seemed happy to be back in his childhood home. Jessica, however, began making subtle changes almost immediately. She rearranged furniture without asking, replaced family photos with modern art prints, and referred to rooms as needing updates. The first significant tension arose when Jessica began referring to the house as theirs in conversations with friends and service providers. I overheard her on the phone, saying, "We need someone to look at the gutters on our house," and, "Yes, we just moved into our new place." Each time I felt a twinge of discomfort, but told myself she was just adjusting to her new living situation. To keep the peace, I offered Daniel and Jessica the master bedroom, moving my things to the smaller guest room. The master suite had its own bathroom and walk-in closet, which I thought would give them privacy and space. Jessica accepted this offer without hesitation or gratitude, immediately planning renovations to what she called their bedroom. My daughter Amanda lives about 30 minutes away with her husband Patrick and their 2 teenagers, Lily and Jack. Amanda is a pediatric nurse with a direct, no-nonsense approach to life. She never quite warmed to Jessica, describing her as calculating when we spoke privately. Patrick, who works in software development, is easygoing by nature but fiercely protective of our family. My sister Judith is my closest confidant. 2 years younger than me, she lives alone in a condo about 20 minutes away. She never married but has lived a rich life as a travel writer. Judith has always had an uncanny ability to read people, and she expressed concerns about Jessica from their first meeting. There's something off about her, Judith told me. She looks at everything, like she's assessing its value. Last Thanksgiving was meant to be special. It would be the first major holiday where our extended family would gather in the house since Daniel and Jessica moved in. I spent weeks planning the menu, shopping for ingredients, and preparing what I could in advance. I wanted everyone to feel welcome and comfortable. The week before Thanksgiving, I was in the laundry room when I overheard Jessica on the phone in the kitchen. Living with his mother wasn't part of my plan, she said to whoever was on the other end of the call. But it's temporary. We'll have this place to ourselves eventually. I felt a chill hearing those words, but convinced myself I was overreacting. Perhaps she just meant that eventually, years down the road, the house would go to Daniel as inheritance. That would be natural enough. I pushed the comment from my mind and focused on creating a perfect Thanksgiving celebration. I polished my grandmother's silver serving dishes, ironed the embroidered tablecloth that had been a wedding gift, and set the table with care. I wanted this Thanksgiving to be memorable for all the right reasons. I had no idea how memorable it would actually become. I woke at 5:30 on Thanksgiving morning, my mind already racing with the day's timeline. The 20-pound turkey needed to go in the oven by 7 if we wanted to eat around 3 in the afternoon. I had prepared the stuffing the night before, using my mother's recipe with cornbread sausage and dried cranberries. The house was quiet as I made my way downstairs in my robe. The kitchen was exactly as I had left it, pristine and organized with prep stations established for different dishes. I put on a pot of coffee and began working on the turkey, removing the giblets and rinsing the cavity before patting it dry. Daniel came down around 6:15, hair tousled and still in his pajamas. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug. "Need any help?" It reminded me of Thanksgivings past when he was a teenager, bleary-eyed but willing to pitch in. He started chopping onions and celery for the stuffing while I prepared the herb butter for under the turkey's skin. "Jessica still sleeping?" I asked casually, trying to keep any hint of judgment from my voice. "Yeah, she was up late working on some financial reports," Daniel replied. I noticed a slight tightness around his eyes when he mentioned his wife, but I didn't press the issue. Jessica finally appeared around 10, fully dressed in an expensive-looking cashmere sweater and designer, jeans, her hair and makeup impeccable. By this time, the turkey had been in the oven for 3 hours, filling the house with a mouth-watering aroma. Daniel and I had prepared the sweet potato casserole, green bean dish, and cranberry sauce. The pies, pumpkin and pecan, were cooling on racks by the window. "Good morning," I said cheerfully. "Coffee's fresh if you'd like some." Jessica nodded without smiling, pouring herself a cup. "The house smells like food," she commented, wrinkling her nose slightly. "Not smells good or smells delicious, just smells like food, as if that were somehow offensive." "Mom's been working since dawn," Daniel said, a hint of protective pride in his voice. "Everything's going to be amazing." "I'm sure it will be," Jessica replied without enthusiasm, pulling out her phone and scrolling through messages. Amanda and her family arrived at noon, bringing additional side dishes and a bottle of sparkling cider for the kids. Amanda hugged me tightly, then immediately rolled up her sleeves to help. Patrick carried in their contributions, followed by Lily and Jack, both teenagers now, but still excited about the holiday. "The house looks beautiful," Mom, Amanda said, admiring the fall decorations I had placed throughout the living and dining rooms. "You've outdone yourself." "Grandma, did you make your famous rolls?" Jack asked hopefully. At 14, he was growing rapidly and seemed perpetually hungry. "2 batches just for you," I assured him with a wink. Lily, 16, and increasingly interested in cooking, joined me in the kitchen. "Can I help with anything, Grandma? I've been watching cooking videos online." Before I could answer, Jessica interjected from the living room. "Lily, be careful with your grandmother's things. Some of them are quite outdated and fragile." The comment stung, implying both that my kitchen equipment was obsolete and that my granddaughter was careless. Judith arrived at 1:30, carrying 2 homemade pies and a tote bag filled with small gifts for everyone. At 70, my sister remained vibrant and stylish, her silver hair cut in a fashionable bob. She gave me a knowing look as she entered the kitchen, immediately sensing something was off. "You look tired, Nancy," she whispered as she hugged me. "Everything okay?" Just busy with preparations, I assured her, though in truth, Jessica's cold demeanor had been draining my energy all morning. As the afternoon progressed, I noticed Jessica checking her phone with increasing frequency, her expression darkening with each glance. She received a call around 2 and stepped outside to take it returning, with a pinched look on her face. By 3 o'clock, the dining room table was a vision of Thanksgiving abundance. I had used my mother's heirloom china white with a delicate gold rim and arranged my grandmother's crystal water glasses at each place setting. The turkey golden brown and succulent took center stage, surrounded by bowls and platters of colorful side dishes. Fall-colored candles in silver holders added a warm glow to the scene. As everyone gathered taking their seats, Jessica poured herself a generous glass of wine, her third since guests had begun arriving. Daniel gave her a concerned glance which she pointedly ignored. Once we were all seated, Daniel stood to give the traditional Thanksgiving toast, something his father had always done. "I want to thank my mother for this beautiful meal and for opening her home to all of us," he began. I noticed Jessica roll her eyes slightly at the phrase "her home," an expression caught by Judith, who raised an eyebrow in response. Daniel continued, "Dad would be proud to see us all together, carrying on the traditions he loved. To family and gratitude." Everyone raised their glasses, murmuring in agreement. Jessica took a large swallow of her wine, then leaned over to whisper something to Daniel. His face tightened, and he shook his head slightly. The first serving of food began making its rounds, plates being filled with turkey stuffing, mashed potatoes, and all the traditional sides. Compliments flowed about each dish. "Nancy, these mashed potatoes are so creamy," Patrick said appreciatively. "The turkey is perfectly cooked," Mom Amanda added. Jessica picked at her food, then said, "These recipes are certainly traditional. My mother makes a cranberry sauce with orange zest and star anise that's a bit more modern." I smiled tightly. "I'd love to try that sometime. This is the recipe my mother taught me." The meal continued with pleasant conversation about the children's school activities, Judith's recent trip to Portugal, and Daniel's upcoming business conference. I began to relax, thinking perhaps the day would unfold without incident after all. I couldn't have been more wrong. We were midway through the meal when Jessica suddenly stood up, grabbing her knife and loudly clinking it against her wine glass. The sharp sound cut through the conversation, drawing everyone's attention. Her cheeks were flushed from the wine, but her eyes were clear and determined. "I have something important to address before we continue with this lovely family dinner," she announced, her voice carrying an edge that immediately set me on alert. Daniel looked up at his wife with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "Jessica, maybe this isn't the time," he said quietly. She ignored him, scanning the table with a gaze that seemed both challenging and triumphant. "Daniel and I have been discussing our living situation, and we've made some decisions that affect everyone here, particularly Nancy." A knot began forming in my stomach. Amanda straightened in her chair, her nurse's instincts for trouble clearly activated. "As you all know," Jessica continued, "we've been living in this house for over 2 years now. We've invested in updates, paid for repairs, and essentially taken over the management of the property. What began as a temporary arrangement has evolved, and it's time to formalize things." She paused for effect, taking another sip of wine before delivering her bombshell. "Starting January 1st, we'll be implementing a rental agreement for Nancy. The fair market value for a room in this neighborhood with utilities and meals included comes to $2,300 per month." Gasps erupted around the table. Jack and Lily exchanged confused glances. Patrick set down his fork with a clatter. Jessica raised her voice to speak over the murmurs of disbelief. "This is simply good financial management. Everyone should contribute fairly to household expenses." "Contribute?" Amanda interjected, her voice tight with anger. "This is our mother's house. She owns it outright." Jessica's smile was cold. "Actually, the ownership situation has changed. Daniel and I have been managing the property, and we need to be compensated appropriately." She turned her gaze directly to me, and the naked calculation in her eyes sent a chill through me. "Your free ride is over," she declared loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Pay rent or leave my house." The dining room fell completely silent. Even the teenagers, usually absorbed in their own world, were frozen in shock. Judith's hand flew to her mouth. Amanda looked like she might launch herself across the table at Jessica at any moment. Daniel sat with his head bowed, his face, a mask of discomfort and shame. He couldn't meet anyone's eyes, least of all, mine. For several seconds, no one moved or spoke. I felt as though I'd been physically struck. My heart pounded in my chest, and my face flushed with a combination of shock, hurt, and rising anger. My hands began to tremble slightly, and I carefully placed my napkin on the table to hide this reaction. Around me, my family waited for my response. Amanda looked ready to speak on my behalf, but Judith placed a restraining hand on her arm, silently communicating that this was my battle to fight. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts and my dignity. Then slowly and deliberately I stood up my chair, scraping against the hardwood floor in the silent room. Jessica's expression remained triumphant, clearly expecting me to be flustered or overwhelmed. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and looked her directly in the eye. "This is my house, not yours," I said, my voice quiet but firm. The 5 simple words hung in the air. Jessica's face changed rapidly, first draining of color, then flushing dark red with anger. "Not anymore," she snapped back. "Daniel showed me the deed weeks ago. Both our names are on it now as joint owners. We've been generous letting you stay here without contributing, but that arrangement is ending." I looked at Daniel, who finally raised his head. The conflict on his face was evident, a mixture of guilt and confusion. "Mom, I never," he began, but Jessica cut him off. "Show them the papers, Daniel," she demanded. "Tell them about the agreement." My son looked genuinely bewildered. "What papers are you talking about? I never signed anything adding you to the deed." Jessica's confident expression faltered slightly. "The paperwork we filed, with the lawyer, for the property transfer." A horrible suspicion began forming in my mind. What lawyer, Jessica? I never authorized any property transfer, and this house has been fully paid off for 15 years. "This is ridiculous," Jessica said, her voice rising. "Daniel, tell them about the meeting with the lawyer. About the deed transfer." My son shook his head slowly. "Jessica, I don't know what you're talking about. We never met with any lawyer about my mother's house." The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. Jessica's confident demeanor cracked further, and for the first time I saw panic flash in her eyes. Amanda broke the tense silence. "I think we all need to see this supposed deed," she said, her professional, no-nonsense tone taking over. "Mom, where do you keep your house documents?" "In my office in the locked file cabinet," I replied, not taking my eyes off Jessica, whose face now showed a mix of defiance and growing alarm. "Jessica has a copy," Daniel said slowly. "She told me the bank needed it for some paperwork, but I never saw the final documents." All eyes turned to Jessica, who was now gripping the edge of the table. "This is absurd," she said. "I don't have to prove anything to any of you. The legal documents speak for themselves." Patrick, always, the practical one, spoke up. "If everything's legitimate, there should be no problem producing the paperwork, right?" Jessica's eyes darted around the room, seeming to calculate her options. Finally, she pushed her chair back abruptly, nearly knocking it over. "I don't have to sit here and be interrogated during Thanksgiving dinner," she declared. "Daniel, we're leaving." My son didn't move. "I'm not going anywhere until we figure this out," he said quietly. "Mom, I swear I never signed anything transferring ownership of your house." Jessica stood alone, the family united against her. The Thanksgiving meal lay forgotten on the table as we faced a crisis none of us could have anticipated. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll get the documents. Then you'll all see who's really in control here." She stormed out of the dining room toward the stairs, her footsteps heavy with anger. As soon as she was gone, Daniel turned to me, his face stricken. "Mom, I would never try to take your house. I don't know what she's talking about." "I believe you," I said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "But something very concerning is happening here." Judith's voice was steady when she spoke. "Nancy, I think you need to check your important papers, right now." The Thanksgiving dinner ended abruptly after Jessica's shocking announcement. Amanda and Patrick hurriedly gathered their stunned children, promising to return the next day to help sort things out. The teenagers, usually reluctant to leave family gatherings early, seemed relieved to escape the tension. "Mom, call me tonight," Amanda insisted as she hugged me goodbye. "And don't sign anything no matter what Jessica says." Judith refused to leave, settling herself firmly on the living room sofa. "I'm staying right here," she announced. "You shouldn't be alone with those two right now." Daniel had followed Jessica upstairs, and muffled sounds of an argument filtered down to us. Occasionally, Jessica's voice would rise enough for us to catch phrases like ruining everything and your mother or me. I sat in Thomas's old armchair feeling numb. The beautiful Thanksgiving meal I had worked so hard to prepare lay abandoned on the dining room table, a sad testament to the day's collapse. "I should clean up," I said, automatically starting to rise. Judith gently pushed me back into the chair. "The dishes can wait. Let's think this through. Has Jessica been acting unusual lately?" I considered the question. She's been on her phone more than usual, having whispered conversations. And I caught her in my home office last week. She said she was looking for stamps. Judith's eyes narrowed. "Have you checked your financial documents recently? Your deed insurance papers, bank statements?" I hadn't, I realized with a sinking feeling. Since Thomas died, I had been methodical about keeping our important papers organized in the file cabinet in my office, but I rarely had reason to review them. A door slammed upstairs, followed by the sound of Jessica's angry footsteps descending the stairs. She stormed past us without a word, grabbed her coat and purse from the entryway closet, and left the house, slamming the front door behind her. Daniel appeared a moment later, looking exhausted and bewildered. "She's going to stay at a hotel," he said, running his hands through his hair. "She says I'm betraying her by not backing her up." "Daniel," I said carefully, "did you ever sign any papers regarding this house? Anything at all?" He shook his head. "Just some insurance forms you asked me to sign as your emergency contact after Dad died. Nothing about ownership or transfers." "We need to check your files," Judith said decisively. "Right now." The three of us went to my home office, a small room that had once been a nursery when the children were babies. My desk faced the window overlooking the backyard, and the file cabinet stood in the corner. As we approached it, I immediately noticed something wrong. "The lock is damaged," I said, pointing to scratches around the keyhole. "Someone tried to force it." I took the key from my desk drawer and opened the cabinet. The hanging files appeared to be in order, but when I reached for the folder labeled House Documents, my heart sank. It was much thinner than it should have been. "The original deed is missing," I said after rifling through the folder's contents, "and the homeowner's insurance policy." Daniel looked stricken. "Mom, I swear I didn't take them." "I believe you," I assured him, though my mind was racing with implications. "We need to call Martin." Martin Lawrence had been our family lawyer for decades, handling everything from our wills to the legal aspects of Thomas's estate. While Daniel used his cell phone to call Martin, I continued checking the file cabinet. My banking information appeared intact, but a folder containing my Social Security card and birth certificate was noticeably thinner. "Martin can see us tomorrow morning. At 9, Daniel reported, after finishing his call. He says not to touch anything else that might be evidence." Evidence. The word hung heavy in the air. We were potentially dealing with fraud or identity theft perpetrated by a family member. Jessica didn't return that night. Daniel tried calling her repeatedly, but she didn't answer. He eventually settled into the guest room, unwilling to sleep in the master bedroom he shared with his wife. I barely slept my mind, replaying Jessica's confident assertion that the house was hers, wondering how deep this deception went and how I could have been so blind to it. Early the next morning, Amanda and Patrick arrived as promised. Patrick brought his laptop, saying he wanted to check county property records online. If Jessica filed any changes to the deed, there should be a record, he explained, setting up at the kitchen table. Amanda helped me make coffee, her capable nurse's hands steady as she measured grounds. "Did you check your credit report, Mom? If she stole your identity, there could be accounts you don't know about." I hadn't thought of that. The idea that Jessica might have used my personal information to open accounts was disturbing but increasingly plausible. Patrick's voice interrupted my thoughts. I found something, he called from the kitchen. We gathered around his laptop as he pointed to the screen. "There's a record of a quitclaim deed filed 3 weeks ago, transferring partial ownership from Nancy Wilson to Jessica Wilson." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. I never signed anything like that." "Look at the signature," Daniel said, pointing to the digital copy Patrick had pulled up. The signature looked like mine, but with subtle differences I might recognize, but a stranger wouldn't. Someone had practiced forging my handwriting. "We need to print this for Martin," I said, feeling sick. and I need to check my office more thoroughly." Amanda and I went back to the office while Daniel and Patrick continued searching online records. In the back of my closet behind winter coats rarely worn in our mild climate, I found a small fireproof box I used for rarely needed documents. The spare house key is missing, I discovered after opening the box, and so is the extra key to the file cabinet. Amanda helped me search the entire office. Behind the decorative wastebasket, partially hidden by the desk, we found a crumpled ball of paper. Amanda carefully smoothed it out. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Mom, look at this." It was a practice sheet with multiple attempts at copying my signature. Just then Daniel appeared in the doorway, his face ashen. "You need to see what Patrick found," he said grimly. Back in the kitchen, Patrick had uncovered more disturbing information. "There's a home equity line of credit taken out against this house 6 weeks ago," he reported, "for $150,000. "That's impossible," I gasped. "I never applied for any loan." The application was supposedly signed by both Nancy Wilson and Daniel Wilson as co-owners, Patrick continued. "But there's more. The funds were disbursed to an account at First National in the name of Jessica Wilson." Daniel looked like he might be sick. "I never signed anything like that. Ever." We gathered all the documents we could find, including the practice signature sheet, to take to Martin's office. Before we left, I tried accessing my online banking account but discovered the password had been changed. Martin Lawrence's law office was in a converted Victorian house downtown. Despite being a Saturday, he had come in specifically to meet us, his lined face grave as we explained the situation. "This is very serious," he said after examining the documents. "These are clearly forged signatures, and the property transfer was never legally authorized by you, Nancy. We need to contact the police immediately." While Martin called his contact at the police department, Daniel sat with his head in his hands. "I had no idea," he kept saying. "She told me she was handling some paperwork for the house insurance. I never thought she would do something like this." Martin arranged for a detective to meet us at his office. Detective Lisa Rodriguez arrived within the hour, her manner professional but compassionate, as she took our statements and examined the evidence. "Unfortunately, this type of family fraud is more common than people realize," she told us. "We'll need to get handwriting experts to officially confirm the forgery, but based on what I'm seeing, we have enough to open an investigation." She turned to Daniel. "Mr. Wilson, do you have any idea where your wife might be now?" Daniel shook his head miserably. "She texted me this morning saying she was staying with a friend, but she wouldn't tell me who or where. She's still insisting that the house transfer was legitimate." Detective Rodriguez made notes. "We'll need to locate her for questioning. In the meantime, Mrs. Wilson, I strongly recommend you check all your financial accounts and credit reports. If she had access to your personal information, there could be more fraudulent activity." As we were preparing to leave, Martin pulled me aside. "Nancy, there's something else you should know. I did some checking, and it appears Jessica was previously involved in a similar situation with her first husband's family. There were allegations of financial impropriety, though no charges were ever filed." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Jessica had a history of this behavior, and none of us had known. I wondered what else she had hidden from Daniel, from all of us. Back at home, the investigation continued on multiple fronts. Patrick helped me place fraud alerts on my credit reports and discovered 2 credit cards had been opened in my name within the last 3 months, both with large balances. Amanda found receipts in the master bedroom for expensive jewelry, designer, clothing, and electronics, all purchased within the time frame of the fraudulent home equity loan. Daniel returned to the house alone in the late afternoon, looking utterly defeated. "I finally reached Jessica," he said. "She claims she did nothing wrong, that I knew about everything, and am just trying to back out now. She's threatening to sue all of us for defamation." I put my arm around my son's shoulders, feeling his pain acutely. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. This isn't your fault." "But it is," he insisted. "I brought her into our family, into your home, and she was planning this all along." That evening, as we sat in the living room discussing next steps, Daniel made a devastating confession. "There's something else you should know," he said quietly. "Jessica has a gambling problem. She told me it was in the past, that she had it under control. But I found online casino apps on her phone last month, and statements showing large withdrawals from our joint account. The pieces were falling into place. Jessica's financial fraud might have been fueled by gambling debts or addiction. "Why didn't you say something?" Amanda asked her brother. Daniel looked ashamed. "She promised she would get help. And I was embarrassed. I didn't want everyone to know my marriage was failing." The painful irony was that in trying to protect his marriage, Daniel had left our family vulnerable to Jessica's schemes. As the shock of betrayal settled into a dull ache, I found myself cycling through emotions: hurt anger, disbelief, and oddly enough, a growing sense of resolve. This was my home, my life, and I would not allow Jessica's deception to destroy what Thomas and I had built. The days following Thanksgiving unfolded in a blur of legal meetings, financial discoveries, and emotional conversations. Each revelation about Jessica's deception cut deeper, exposing the calculated nature of her fraud. Monday morning, I met with my bank manager, Harold Freeman, who had known Thomas and me for decades. His face grew increasingly concerned as I explained the situation. "Let's look at all your accounts immediately," he said, typing rapidly on his computer. What we found was alarming. Beyond the home equity line of credit, there had been unusual transfers from my savings account to an unfamiliar account over the past 3 months, totaling nearly $20,000. "I never authorized these transfers," I said, feeling sick. Harold nodded grimly. "Someone used your online banking credentials. We can dispute these transactions as fraudulent, but we'll need the police report." After placing a freeze on all my accounts, Harold helped me open new ones with enhanced security features. "We'll need to change all your passwords and set up 2-factor authentication," he explained. That afternoon, Detective Rodriguez called to inform me that they had discovered 3 credit cards opened in my name that I hadn't known about. The combined balance was over $30,000, with charges for luxury hotels, designer boutiques, and several large cash advances. "We believe the cash advances may be related to gambling activities," she said. "We've subpoenaed records from several online gambling sites where accounts were opened using your address but Jessica's email." Daniel was devastated by each new discovery. "I had no idea it went this deep," he said, when I told him about the credit cards. "She kept saying she had inheritance money coming. I believed her." The next revelation came from an unexpected source. Jessica's parents called me directly, having heard from their daughter that there was a misunderstanding about the house. "Mrs. Wilson, we're so sorry," Jessica's mother said, her voice heavy with embarrassment. "We had no idea Jessica was doing this. She's had problems before with money and truthfulness." "What kind of problems?" I asked, putting the call on speaker so Daniel could hear. "Her first marriage ended because she ran up massive debt in her husband's name," Jessica's father explained reluctantly. "His parents nearly lost their retirement savings because of her. We thought she had gotten help, that this time was different." Daniel listened with growing horror as Jessica's parents detailed a pattern of financial manipulation and deception stretching back to her early 20s. They had paid off her debts multiple times, sent her to therapy and treatment programs for gambling addiction, only to have her repeat the cycle. "Why didn't you warn us?" Daniel asked, unable to keep the accusation from his voice. There was a long pause before Jessica's mother answered. "She told us you knew everything about her past, that you had accepted it and were helping her stay accountable. We wanted to believe she had finally changed." After the call ended, Daniel sat in silence for a long time. "I never knew who I was really married to," he finally said. The legal process moved forward with surprising speed given the clear evidence of fraud. Martin filed emergency motions to invalidate the fraudulent property transfer and to remove the home equity line of credit from my property. "The bank is cooperating fully," he reported. "They've admitted their verification procedures were inadequate, and they're working to reverse the loan." Detective Rodriguez called with news that they had located Jessica. "She's been staying at the Lakeside Resort, charging everything to one of the fraudulent credit cards. We've brought her in for questioning." Later that day, Jessica was released on her own recognizance, but served with legal papers: my petition to invalidate the fraudulent deed, the bank's notification of fraud investigation, and Daniel's preliminary divorce filing. Instead of lying low, Jessica made a desperate attempt to salvage her scheme. She showed up at the house unannounced, demanding to speak with Daniel and me together. "This is all a big misunderstanding," she insisted, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Daniel, tell your mother that we discussed making the house joint property. Remember, after we put money into the bathroom renovation, Daniel's face hardened. The bathroom renovation that cost $4,000, not $150,000, the one we did as a favor to Mom, not as some kind of investment property scheme. Jessica's demeanor shifted instantly. Fine, but I'm still entitled to half of everything as your wife, this house included. That's not how property law works, I said calmly. This house was never marital property. It was mine before you and Daniel married, and I never transferred ownership. Jessica's eyes narrowed. You'll regret this. All of you. I have rights. After she left, Daniel called his divorce attorney to report the encounter. Later that evening, we received notification that Jessica had filed an emergency motion, claiming she was being denied access to her residence and possessions. She's trying to establish that this is her legal residence, Martin explained when I called him in a panic. Don't worry. We have the evidence of fraud, and the judge will see through this. He was right. The judge issued a temporary restraining order preventing Jessica from entering the property until the fraud investigation was complete, citing the considerable evidence of criminal activity related to the house. In the midst of the legal battles, I met with a financial advisor recommended by Martin, Cynthia Park, specialized in helping victims of financial fraud, particularly older adults. Unfortunately, what you're experiencing is increasingly common, she told me during our first meeting. Financial exploitation of seniors often involves family members or caregivers who have access to personal information. With Cynthia's help, I began the painstaking process of securing my financial future. We set up new accounts with proper safeguards, created a more comprehensive estate plan, and established clear boundaries around who could access my information. No one should have blanket authority, she advised. Even trusted family members should have limited specific powers that you can monitor. Meanwhile, Daniel began his own healing journey. He started seeing a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma, trying to understand how he had been so thoroughly deceived by Jessica. My therapist says Jessica shows signs of being a pathological liar, he told me after one session. She created a completely false reality, and I accepted it because I wanted to believe in our marriage. Jessica's previous victims began contacting us after news of her arrest for forgery and fraud became public. Her first husband's mother called me personally. We lost $60,000 because of her, the woman explained. She convinced my son that we had agreed to loan them money for a house down payment, forged our signatures on loan documents. By the time we discovered what had happened, the money was gone, gambled away. Why didn't you press charges? I asked. She threatened to claim my son was abusive if we didn't drop it. He was applying to law school at the time and couldn't risk the accusation. We paid off the debt and walked away. Similar stories emerged from others. A former roommate whose identity Jessica had stolen to open credit cards, a previous employer who had discovered her embezzling funds, all situations where Jessica had manipulated, lied, and stolen, then used. Threats and intimidation to avoid consequences. As the evidence against Jessica mounted, her legal position weakened. The prosecutor added additional charges of identity theft, bank fraud, and elder financial abuse to the original forgery charges. Jessica's lawyer attempted to negotiate a plea deal that would minimize jail time, arguing that his client suffered from addiction and mental health issues that required treatment rather than incarceration. She's trying to use gambling addiction as an excuse, Detective Rodriguez told me during an update call. But the level of planning and deception in this case demonstrates clear intent. This wasn't impulsive behavior. Throughout this ordeal, my family grew closer. Amanda and Patrick came over regularly, helping me implement new security measures for the house and my accounts. Judith stayed with me for several weeks, her presence a comforting reminder that I wasn't facing this alone. Daniel moved into an apartment near his office, needing space to process his feelings about Jessica's betrayal and their impending divorce. He came for dinner every Sunday, gradually finding his way back to himself as the weeks passed. I keep asking myself how I missed the signs, he said during one of these dinners. There were so many red flags. We all missed them, I assured him. She was very skilled at manipulation. As the criminal case against Jessica progressed, I received an unexpected call from her lawyer. Mrs. Wilson, my client, would like to speak with you directly. She says there are things she needs to explain in person. After consulting with Martin, I declined the request. There's nothing Jessica could say that would change what she did, I told my family. I don't need her explanations or excuses. It was a small but significant moment for me establishing a boundary and reclaiming my power in a situation where Jessica had tried to render me helpless. With each step of the legal process, with each account secured and document restored, I felt myself growing stronger. The woman who had been momentarily stunned into silence at the Thanksgiving table was finding her voice again more powerful than before. 3 months after the disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, I sat in a courtroom watching Jessica enter in handcuffs for her preliminary hearing. She looked smaller somehow, her designer clothes replaced by a plain blouse, and slacks her usually perfect hair pulled back severely. Daniel sat beside me, his face expressionless. We had agreed to attend all court proceedings together, presenting a united front against Jessica's deceptions. Jessica pleaded not guilty to all charges, despite the overwhelming evidence against her. Her attorney argued that she had believed she was entitled to partial ownership of the house as Daniel's wife, and that there had been a misunderstanding about the financial arrangements. The prosecution countered with the practice signature sheets found in my office, the bank surveillance footage showing Jessica withdrawing cash from the fraudulent line of credit, and testimony from the notary who had allegedly witnessed my signature on the quitclaim deed. I never met this woman, the notary testified, pointing to me. The person who came in with these documents claimed to be Nancy Wilson, but it was definitely the defendant, Jessica Wilson. When Jessica took the stand, she tried a new strategy, painting herself as a confused victim. Daniel told me his mother wanted us to have the house, she claimed, her voice quavering. He said she was getting older and couldn't manage it anymore. I was just handling the paperwork like he asked me to. Daniel stiffened beside me, his hands clenching into fists. I placed my hand gently over his, a silent reminder that her lies couldn't hurt us anymore. Jessica's performance didn't sway the judge, who cited the compelling evidence of premeditated fraud in denying her attorney's motion to dismiss the charges. Outside the courthouse, a woman approached us hesitantly. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm Laura Bennett. Jessica was married to my brother." We invited Laura for coffee, where she shared disturbing similarities between Jessica's behavior in her previous marriage and what we had experienced. She isolated my brother from our family, constantly told him we were trying to interfere in their finances, and gradually took control of everything. By the end, he didn't even have access to his own bank accounts. "Did she have gambling problems then too?" Daniel asked. Laura nodded. Massive ones. She would disappear for days and come back having lost thousands of dollars. When my brother finally confronted her, she threatened to tell his employer he had a drug problem if he didn't cover for her. These conversations with Jessica's previous victims helped Daniel process his own experience. "It wasn't just me," he said after Laura left. "She's done this before, multiple times." The divorce proceedings moved forward in parallel with the criminal case. Jessica initially contested everything, demanding half the value of their house and alimony payments. "She's delusional," Daniel's divorce attorney said after the first settlement conference. "Given the criminal charges and evidence of fraud, she has no legal claim to the house whatsoever. And with her history of deception about finances, her demands for support won't get much sympathy from the judge." The attorney was right. When presented with the full evidence of Jessica's fraudulent activities, the divorce court judge swiftly rejected her claims to the house and any substantial settlement. The court finds clear evidence that the respondent entered into this marriage with fraudulent intent and engaged in financial misconduct throughout, the judge stated. The petitioner is granted divorce on grounds of fraud and financial misconduct, with no alimony awarded to the respondent. Jessica's criminal case concluded with a plea agreement. Facing overwhelming evidence and multiple charges, she agreed to plead guilty to forgery, identity theft, and elder financial abuse in exchange for a lighter sentence. The judge ordered her to pay full restitution for all fraudulent charges and loans, plus additional damages. She received 3 years of probation, mandatory gambling addiction treatment, and 200 hours of community service. "She should be going to jail," Amanda said angrily when we learned of the sentence. "The important thing is that she's been stopped," I replied, "and the legal record will make it harder for her to do this to someone else." With the legal matters resolved, we began the emotional process of reclaiming our lives and home. Daniel helped me box up Jessica's remaining belongings, which her parents came to collect. "We're so deeply sorry," her father said as they prepared to leave. We should have warned your family about her patterns." I felt a complex mixture of anger and compassion toward these people who had raised such a troubled daughter and then failed to protect others from her. "She needs help," I said finally. "Real help, not just covering up her messes." They nodded sadly before driving away with the physical remnants of Jessica's presence in our lives. After they left, I reclaimed the master bedroom, replacing the expensive bedding Jessica had bought with my own comfortable quilts and pillows. Daniel helped me move my clothes back into the walk-in closet that had been mine for decades. "Does it feel strange?" he asked as we arranged my things. "Taking back what was always yours?" I considered the question. Not strange. Empowering. For a while, I let someone make me feel like a guest in my own home. Never again. The bank finally reversed the fraudulent home equity loan, removing it from my property record. They also agreed to a settlement for their failure to properly verify the loan application, which helped cover the legal fees we had incurred. Amanda assisted me in installing new security measures, including changing all the locks and adding a security system with cameras. "Not that we're expecting more trouble," she explained, "but it's good to be prepared." Daniel found an apartment across town and began building an independent life again. He joined a support group for people who had been victims of relationship fraud, finding comfort in sharing experiences with others who understood. "The therapist says I need to establish my own identity separate from what happened with Jessica," he explained during one of our weekly dinners. "I've spent so long feeling like a fool for not seeing through her lies. Now I need to focus on rebuilding." I discovered during this period that my own healing process wouldn't be linear. Some days I felt strong and resilient, while others brought waves of anger or sadness that Jessica had violated the safety of my home and family so completely. Judith, always my rock, reminded me to be patient with myself. "You've been through a trauma, Nancy. It's okay to have bad days." 6 months after Thanksgiving, I received notification that Jessica had violated her probation by visiting a casino. She would serve 6 months in county jail as a result. Rather than feeling vindicated, I felt a strange sort of peace. Jessica was no longer my problem or concern. Her choices and consequences belonged to her alone. The final step in reclaiming my life came unexpectedly. Daniel had been bringing his mail to my house since he hadn't yet set up a permanent address. Among the letters one day was an envelope addressed to Jessica, forwarded from their old apartment. Daniel hesitated before opening it. "It's from a hospital in Las Vegas," he said, scanning the contents. "Medical records. Mom Jessica was pregnant when we got married. She had an abortion 2 weeks before the wedding. The revelation could have reopened wounds, but instead it provided a kind of closure. She never intended to build a real life with you," I said gently. "She was playing a role from the beginning." Daniel nodded slowly. "I think I needed to know that none of it was real. Now I can finally let go." As summer arrived, nearly 7 months after the confrontation that had changed everything, I felt myself truly healing. The legal battles were behind us. The financial damage had been largely repaired, and our family had emerged stronger than before. I decided it was time to take control of my future on my own terms. After careful consideration, I invited my family over for dinner to share my decision. "I'm going to sell the house," I announced, once everyone was seated. Their surprised expressions made me smile. "Not because of Jessica," I clarified, "but because it's time. This house has served its purpose. It's where Thomas and I raised our children, where we built our life together. Now I want something that's just for me for this chapter of my life." Amanda looked concerned. "Are you sure, Mom? This has been your home for so long." "I'm sure," I said confidently. "I've found a lovely condo near Judith with no stairs and a beautiful garden courtyard. It's time for a fresh start." Daniel nodded in understanding. "You're not running away. You're moving forward." "Exactly," I agreed. "And I want all of you to help me decide what to bring with me and what to let go. This move is about choice, not about what Jessica tried to take from me." As my family discussed the future with enthusiasm, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Jessica had tried to steal my home, my security, and my dignity. Instead, she had inadvertently given me something precious, the knowledge that I was stronger than I had ever imagined. 1 year after that fateful Thanksgiving, I stood in my new condo, arranging fresh flowers in a vase by the window. The space was smaller than my old house, but perfectly suited to my needs, with wide doorways, a first-floor location, and a sunny kitchen where I still loved to cook. The past year had brought challenges I never expected to face in my 70s, but also growth and self-discovery that surprised me. Each step of reclaiming my life had taught me something valuable about resilience, boundaries, and trusting my instincts. Looking back, I realized there had been warning signs about Jessica from the beginning, small moments of discomfort I had dismissed out of love for my son and a desire to welcome his wife into our family. I had ignored my own intuition, allowing politeness and family harmony to override the quiet alarm bells in my mind. Never again would I silence that inner voice. Age had given me wisdom, and this experience had given me courage to act on that wisdom without apology. My relationship with Daniel had evolved through this painful journey. Initially, he had been consumed by shame and self-recrimination for bringing Jessica into our lives. Through therapy and our honest conversations, he had gradually come to understand that he had been a victim of a skilled manipulator. My therapist says people like Jessica target kind, trusting people, he told me over coffee one morning. My openness wasn't weakness, it was a quality she exploited. Watching my son reclaim his sense of self-worth had been one of the most rewarding aspects of this difficult year. He had taken responsibility for his choices without drowning in blame, a delicate balance that showed his emotional maturity. My bond with Amanda and her family had strengthened as well. During the weeks of legal proceedings and financial recovery, she had shown up consistently, offering practical help and emotional support. Her no-nonsense approach had kept me grounded when I might have given in to despair. "You know what I admire most about you, Mom," she said during one of our regular Sunday visits. "You never played the victim. You were hurt and angry, but you channeled those feelings into action." My sister Judith, always my closest friend, had been my steadfast companion throughout the ordeal. Now in our 70s, we had found a new chapter in our relationship, taking a long-postponed trip to Italy together and considering future adventures. "We've spent too long putting things off," Judith declared as we sipped espresso in a Venetian cafe. "Life is too short and too precious to wait for the perfect moment." The legal aftermath of Jessica's fraud had fully resolved. The fraudulent deed had been invalidated, the home equity loan removed from my property, and all credit cards opened in my name had been closed with the debts discharged as fraudulent. Jessica had served her 6 months in county jail for violating probation and was now living in another state under court supervision. Daniel's divorce was final, and he had legal protections in place should she ever try to contact him again. More meaningful than these practical resolutions was the inner healing I had experienced. The shock and humiliation of being called a freeloader in my own home had eventually given way to a profound appreciation for my own strength and the genuine support system around me. 6 months after moving into my new condo, I made a decision that surprised even me. I volunteered with a local organization that provided financial literacy education to seniors. Drawing on my teaching background and my personal experience, I began leading workshops on recognizing and preventing elder financial abuse. "The shame that victims feel often prevents them from coming forward," I explained to my first group. "But financial exploitation can happen to anyone regardless of education or background. The more we talk about it, the more we remove that stigma." Sharing my story with others who had experienced similar betrayals became an unexpected source of healing. Each time I helped another senior navigate the complicated emotions and practical challenges of financial recovery, I reclaimed a bit more of my own power. New traditions emerged to replace those tainted by Jessica's Thanksgiving announcement. Instead of hosting a formal dinner on the holiday itself, I now organized a gratitude gathering the weekend before, where family and close friends shared a potluck meal, and each person spoke about something they were thankful for. "I'm grateful for second chances," Daniel said at our most recent gathering, "and for family that stands by you through the worst times." He had begun dating again cautiously. Caroline was a kindergarten teacher he had met through a mutual friend, a warm, straightforward woman with a quirky sense of humor. When he brought her to family gatherings, I was struck by how differently he interacted with her compared to Jessica, with an easy authenticity that had been missing in his previous relationship. Managing my finances independently had become a point of pride. Working with Cynthia, my financial advisor, I had created a comprehensive system for monitoring my accounts, complete with alerts for unusual activity and regular reviews of all statements. "You've become one of my most financially savvy clients," Cynthia remarked during our annual review. "Many people half your age don't have this level of organization and awareness." The experience had changed my relationship with trust as well. I had always been naturally trusting, believing in people's good intentions until proven otherwise. Now I understood that trust should be extended, gradually earned through consistent actions, rather than given unconditionally from the start. This measured approach to trust didn't make me cynical as I had initially feared. Instead, it allowed me to form deeper, more authentic connections based on mutual respect and demonstrated trustworthiness. Perhaps the most profound change was in how I viewed myself. For years after Thomas died, I had unconsciously defined myself primarily as a widow, a mother, a grandmother, roles in relation to others. The crisis with Jessica had forced me to stand firmly in my own identity, to advocate for myself with conviction. "You know what Jessica never understood," I said to Judith, as we sat on my small patio watching the sunset, "that this was never really about the house or the money. It was about dignity and autonomy, about having the right to make choices about my own life." Judith nodded. "Some people mistake kindness for weakness. You taught her otherwise." As I approached my 73rd birthday, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced before. I had weathered one of the most challenging periods of my life, and emerged not just intact but wiser, and more authentically myself. Daniel came to visit me on the anniversary of that Thanksgiving confrontation, bringing a small potted plant for my kitchen window. "To new growth," he said, placing it carefully on the sill. We sat together in comfortable silence for a moment before he spoke again. "I keep thinking about those 5 words you said to Jessica at the table. This is my house, not yours. You looked so calm when you said it, but it changed everything." I smiled at the memory. Sometimes the simplest truths are the most powerful. "You taught me something important that day," Daniel continued, "that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary." His words touched me deeply. If my painful experience could help my son set healthier boundaries in his own life, perhaps some good had come from it after all. That evening after Daniel left, I sat down to write in the journal I had been keeping since the ordeal began. I had found that writing helped me process my emotions and track my healing journey. The greatest lesson I wrote is that we are never too old to reclaim our power, to stand in our truth, to begin again. Jessica tried to make me feel small and dependent, but instead she inadvertently revealed my own strength. For that unintended gift, I can almost thank her. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to take advantage of you or a loved one? The courage to speak up can be so difficult to find in those moments, but it's often the first step toward reclaiming your power. I'd love to hear your stories of resilience in the comments below. And if you found value in my story, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more life lessons from someone who's learned them the hard way. Share this with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength today. Thank you for being here with me, and remember, it's never too late to start a new chapter.